what makes a good question for you both? What makes a good question? And why is questioning so important? Sorry, I have two questions.
Yeah, it's a good question. What is a good question? Typically, first of all, welcome from my side as well. I'm very happy to be here. I've listened the past 45 minutes, and it's a pleasure, Chris, to meet you and to be on the virtual stage with you, and to meet all of you guys as well. So what is a good question? A good question is something that causes the one who's asked to think, and that's typically a question that you did not anticipate. So I shared a picture on LinkedIn a couple of days ago, which is there are two ways to ask questions. The first one is you just go straight ahead and ask the obvious question. For example, Cristiano Ronaldo, how much he likes football. That's a question that he's always asked. But maybe you should try to ask another question. For example, like a more specific one where, for example, all his trophies are placed in his house and which one he prefers most. So those are questions that not everyone is asking. And the good thing in asking good questions is that typically the answers tend to be better than on worse questions. And on the other hand side, it's more interesting for the person who's interviewed, and it's more interesting for the audience to listen to the answer. So there are so many good aspects on a good question. And what I always try to do is to not ask the most obvious question, but the question behind that. So that's how I do it. I don't know what Chris' opinion on this is.
Yeah, well, very nice to meet you, Ralph. So your question, Matoki, is a good question, which caused all of us to think a little bit. And that's the DNA of a good question, to get us to think. I think questions go two ways. Question for someone that you're talking to because you want to find out something about them, or a question about a problem or challenge or something that you have for yourself. And so the answer is going to be a little bit different depending on which direction the question is pointed to. So Ralph did a good job about framing a question for someone else. But if you're framing the question for yourself, a good question frames the real problem. So a lot of times people ask very surface level questions about how do I do this? Because they think that one answer is going to solve their problem. And if you answer that question, then you're going to solve a surface problem. And so for me, when I'm listening to the question, I'm always listening for what is the true real problem that hides underneath all of this. And so often a question begs another question back. So when somebody asks a question like, how do I do X? How do I build a website? How do I get my clients to stop bothering me? And then what I think is in the question are all the clues that I need and that the person needs to discover the answer for themselves. So then I would follow up with a question to say, what is it about clients that bother you? And then what we're doing is we're just digging deeper and deeper until we find out what the real problem is. And if the client's bothering you, chances are, generally speaking, it's because you haven't been paid enough money. You feel undervalued. And so every time the client asks a question, you feel annoyed. And then you have to then go back to the beginning of the relationship, which was, did you knowingly go into this relationship with an open heart and agree to do it for this amount, which you did not want to accept? And why would you do that? So a bad question, and maybe sometimes it's easier to understand what a good question is by listening to what a bad question is. A bad question starts out with a lot of context, a lot of story, and the person who's listening is trying their best to keep up with all the information. And we, as the person who's listening to the question, assume every piece of information you're giving is relevant and important, when in truth, none of it is. And then, like for me personally, my circuits are fried. And then you get to your question and I have no idea now what to think. So it's best to start with the question. And if you're talking to a person who's really good at listening, they'll get all the context and the detail from you before even answering. Now, what's strange, since this is a very specific Clubhouse related question, is this. I've been in many, many rooms when somebody will ask a question poorly formed. And what will happen is it becomes a feeding frenzy for like a bunch of people in the room to start providing solutions without context, without understanding the problem. they haven't dug deeper, and it just becomes a template that I find just not very effective for me. And you've seen these rooms where there's like 13, 14 coaches and experts, self-help gurus, marketing wizards, 8-figure entrepreneurs, highest paid coach, the most effective fill in the blank, all these hyperbolic expressions. And they consistently, in my opinion, just fail. Because the person who enters the room and asks the question about a real problem they're having isn't the most reliable person to describe to you the problem. And if you just start solving that, you're operating, I think, under a possibly flawed assumption.
I think, so I really enjoy what you just said about good and bad questions. And I like the approach of describing what a bad question is and then knowing what a good question could be. I think another aspect of a bad question is that it limits the room for responses. So if you have a very good, if you're interviewing a very good person, or if you are asking questions to yourself, then you should ask questions as broad as you could, so that the one who should answer the question can choose which focus he or she wants to set. Because if you want to exaggerate this would just mean that you, for example, ask yes or no questions, or either or questions. That's so simple to answer because you basically provide two options for an answer. But what you really want to have is you want to go under the surface, as Chris just said, and you want to know the reasons. But of course, that's a Clubhouse disease, because the attention span is so small on Clubhouse, and you have to be on point all the time. And the amount of time I'm talking now would be too long for most Clubhouse rooms, especially in the German area, where people just want to hear one key insight after another one. And that automatically leads to superficial conversations, from my point of view.
Thank you so much, Chris. You want to add something?
Yeah, I love that. So Ralph and I we don't know each other, but I feel like we're going to get to know each other soon after this, because we have similar observations, maybe not the exact same, but very similar, in that it's this rapid fire advice giving, insight after insight. But then it creates this thing where we're going really wide, generic, versus deep and focus. And I would rather go deep and focus. And so when we see rooms like this, and this seems to be what's popular, what's normal, I think when they zig, you zag. And so if you have deeper, more meaningful conversations like the ones we're having today, I think you're going to attract a whole different group of people. Because I'm bouncing from room to room, finding like this is just insufferable. There's no value here. It's like reading fortune cookie advice, you know, like, oh, work harder. Okay, yeah, and then what? Oh, life would be easier if you just charge more. But let's get into that. And I think the reason why people do this, and this would be my suspicion, and this is me speaking as an American, so I'm sure it might offend some European sensibilities, but I think people do this because they don't have any more to give you. I think the depth of what they have to offer is like they read the table of contents from a book and that's it. That they don't actually have any real experience in doing this themselves or helping others through this. And I find these rooms, I know that they're popular, it seems like, but it's because the alternative hasn't been available to people. So I'm going to continue to push for deeper, more meaningful conversations to help people really transform versus rapid fire advice machines. And I just don't find that to be that helpful. That would just be my opinion, though.
Motoki, please let me add one insight on that. So on Clubhouse, I'm not just hosting my own rooms, but since I'm moderating a lot outside of Clubhouse as well, I had the pleasure to accompany several brands doing the first steps on Clubhouse. And what typically happened, in January, I was approached by many private persons. Then in late January, I was approached by several brands and companies. And since mid-February, I was approached basically by agencies who try to promote their brands on Clubhouse. And what those agencies tend to do is that they send me like a 10-page memo as for briefing for a Clubhouse room with like, and I'm not exaggerating here, with like 15 topics they want to dive into with like 4 to 5 experts in a 1 hour room. And what I said to them as well, that's not possible. It would feel horrible for everyone listening we could make 15 rooms out of this, but that's not what the customer wanted. They said, well, we have to do it broad, and we have to basically rush through all the questions. And that's why I always hate it when my customers, which mostly are event organizers or brands hosting rooms on Clubhouse, want to dictate me which questions I should ask. And that's always the moment when I say, guys, you hired me because I'm good at asking questions. So please just let me do my job, you do your job. And of course, this might be a little bit offending as well, but that's not just because I want to do this, but because I think it's more valuable for the customers if we take time and focus on one or two of those 15 topics. But that's not how things are approached currently by brands joining Clubhouse, especially in the German area again. So it's not just a US American phenomenon.
Thank you, Ralph. So my heart to share this feels happy because I connected finally, like the two of you as well. I asked Chris in the beginning when he has been to Germany, so to Berlin. So I think Katrin and I will work some plan out to get you to Berlin again, or maybe to Lisbon, maybe to some other places.
As well. Yeah.
Who's joining me with that on that mission? You know. Okay. And I want to do some. Yeah, let's say it's not advertising, but you know, I found all what you are providing, Chris, so generously in the Futur community. So there's no like inside outside. You're doing a lot of things inside and outside as well. But there's culturally speaking, value speaking, it's the same ingredients, the same heart from which you are providing, and your team is as well. And I can testify that it is bringing fruit forward. You know, like people are grasping on that, people are taking on that, and then we're all stumbling forward and we're trying our best. You kind of cheer us up, and I love that. And so I want to kind of invite everyone, or just look at the community. So for my people, I can just say, you know, look at that. I'm always providing you if there's a new course, animation, whatever, you know, hooks you, get on it. And Chris, of course, you will have the final word when you have to leave. Of course, you will have the final words, and then we switch to another topic, maybe.
I don't have any final words. I really enjoyed this conversation. I love your tone, your intentionality, and your. It's just, I've enjoyed our conversations on Clubhouse and elsewhere, and I just want to say you did it again, and I think you brought on a lot of really super smart people, and I love having these deeper conversations. It makes me happy. Thank you.
And for me, kind of a dream came true. One day I was writing Chris on Twitter, and that's how he responds to all his messages. So when he tells you, like, Gesa, reach out on me because I want to learn some more on neuromarketing, I know Chris will answer. So one day I talked to Chris and say, do you want to talk a little bit more about Ikigai? And Chris was so honest and said, I know you are thinking more about this Ikigai, but I'm not the person who was kind of capable to do this talk. So at the same time, you were responding, but you were so damn honest on that. And I really love that. Yeah, I think I can't say much more words. I'm losing my words right now. Thank you for being with us, Chris, for this time. We're going to do it again. We asked you for it, and I know you will reply. You reply to all your messages. I don't know how you do that. Thank you for that.
Thank you. It was very nice, lovely meeting all of you. Thank you very much for having me be part of this. And I look forward to having more conversations with you in the near future, especially in person when things are returning back to somewhat normal.
Although you hate being around people.
It is true, but I'm working on that, Ralph. I am. It's not my default, and I have to psych myself up to do it.
Yeah, we can help you with that, I think. It was a pleasure to meet you.
Very nice meeting you.
Chris.
I hope to connect with you on Clubhouse and elsewhere. Okay.
Yes.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.